Dear Patriots, before the news starts, please subscribe to our patriotic channel by clicking the subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up to this video. Don't forget to leave your opinion below in the comments section. Share the news on Facebook and Twitter so your friends see it. Thank you.
Trump lawyers prepping for potential Mueller interview. President Donald Trump's lawyers are gaming out possible questions and answers for a potential interview with special counsel Robert Mueller, according to two people familiar with the strategy. The preparations reflect an understanding that negotiations with the lead Russia investigator, which have been ongoing since January, will eventually culminate in a sit-down meeting between Mueller and the president. One source said the discussions about the terms of a possible interview may soon even reach a conclusion. "I don't think it's months and months out. I don't think it's in a week," said the person familiar with the negotiations. "But I think it's moving toward closure." But even given the high stakes of a potential meeting with Mueller, Trump's lawyers face a challenge in prepping a president who resists following scripts and who has deep trust in his own improvisational instincts. Trump has said he is eager to meet with Mueller. "I'm looking forward to it, actually," he told reporters in the White House on January 24, adding that his lawyers had informed him the interview could happen in about 2 to 3 weeks. But his attorneys quickly ratcheted back his remarks, saying he was speaking hurriedly before departing for a European trip, and they have since addressed the subject cautiously. The president's timeline has since blown by, and Trump's personal lawyers and some associates have urged him to refuse a sit-down interview that does not include ground rules on the kinds of questions he'd face. It is standard practice for attorneys to anticipate prosecutors' likely questions and craft draft responses for their clients. If an interview between Mueller and Trump is scheduled, Trump and his lawyers may even wargame the session in advance, much as candidates stage mock debates to prepare themselves for opponents. But Trump is not known for studious preparation. He is an impatient reader and spent little time preparing for the 2016 presidential debates. That raises the question of how challenging it might be for his lawyers to ready him for a high-stakes session with Mueller and his crack team of prosecutors. Trump is hardly a stranger to legal proceedings. In one 2012 deposition, according to The Atlantic, Trump said he had participated in more than 100 depositions. But that doesn't mean Trump is always well prepared to field complex legal questions under oath. During a 2016 deposition tied to his lawsuit against a chef who backed out of a deal to open a restaurant at Trump's Washington, D.C., hotel, Trump was asked what he did to prepare for the hearing. "I would say virtually nothing," he replied. "I spoke with my counsel for a short period of time. I just arrived here, and we proceeded to the deposition." Trump added that he didn't study any documents beforehand. Before any interview, Trump and his lawyers must complete their sensitive negotiations with Mueller over its terms. Among other things, Trump's lawyers have argued that the burden is on Mueller to show that his investigation can't be completed without an interview with the president. They have also studied the feasibility of answering questions in writing, as President Ronald Reagan did during the Iran-Contra scandal. And they have made clear their resistance to Mueller questioning Trump more than once. In his document requests, Mueller has expressed an interest in subjects ranging from Trump's firing of FBI Director James Comey to how he responded to the theft and leaks of Democratic emails during the 2016 presidential campaign. "It's a tug-of-war both internally and probably with Mueller," said a senior Republican who recently met with the president. "The end goal for the White House is to get as narrow a discussion as can be possibly negotiated, including maybe just answering written questions like Reagan." The Republican argued that it's in Mueller's interests to narrow the scope of any interview to ensure it isn't just seen as a fishing expedition. "Otherwise it's pointless," the Republican said. "You can't prepare him. And he can't be prepared. And Mueller gets nothing out of it except a perjury charge. Is that all he's trying to get out of this?" Some of the bargaining between Trump's lawyers and Mueller has spilled into the media. A Wall Street Journal story published last Friday said Trump's lawyers were considering offering the special counsel a sit-down interview, but only with conditions, such as a deadline for Mueller to wrap up portions of the probe specifically involving Trump. Solomon Weisenberg, a former deputy on Kenneth Starr's independent counsel investigation into President Bill Clinton, said that idea would be a non-starter for Mueller. "That's bullshit," he said. "You accommodate the president, but you don't change the rules for him in a substantive way." One defense attorney working on the Russia probe speculated that the Journal article may have represented a tactical ploy by Trump's lawyers, an offer Mueller is sure to reject, designed to show the president that they had tried to bargain with the special counsel to no avail. "It's a strategy by the lawyers," the defense attorney said. "Either Mueller will agree to the terms in some fashion, and at least they get something out of it, or he won't, and then they can convince the president not to sit for the interview." The lawyer added that Mueller is also at a crossroads in his pursuit of a Trump interview. If the special counsel pushes too hard, he could end up in a long legal fight that goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and where there's no guarantee the ruling on the other end is favorable to the probe. "They've let themselves be drawn into a sort of a Pyrrhic war," the attorney said. "The problem they have is that they don't know for sure what would happen if they try to subpoena the president." Mueller's office declined comment about the status of talks with Trump lawyers. Weisenberg said it would be reasonable for Mueller to provide Trump with general topics he wants to discuss. But he said the special counsel has adopted aggressive tactics before, including an early morning search of former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort's home, and doubted Mueller would hesitate to subpoena Trump if the president's lawyers balk at a meeting. "If Trump does not sit down and talk, he's going to subpoena him," Weisenberg said. Weisenberg also predicted Mueller would win if the case was decided by the Supreme Court. "He's going to lose 9-0, and Gorsuch is going to write the opinion," he said, referring to Trump's appointee, Associate Justice Neil Gorsuch. Trump's lawyers noted that the president has made no claims of executive privilege, and his lawyers have turned over thousands of pages of White House and campaign documents. "It's been the most transparent inquiry of this type in history," said Jay Sekulow, one of the president's personal lawyers. Asked about the progress of the talks with Mueller, John Dowd, who is serving as the president's lead negotiator on the interview, had nothing to say. "None of your business," he replied. Trump repeats Canada trade deficit claim after boasting about bluffing to Trudeau. President Donald Trump repeated his controversial claim on Thursday that the U.S. has a trade deficit with Canada to swipe at Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, a day after boasting about attempting to bluff the Canadian leader on the subject. "We do have a trade deficit with Canada, as we do with almost all countries, some of them massive," Trump said on Twitter on Thursday morning. PM Justin Trudeau of Canada, a very good guy, doesn't like saying that Canada has a surplus versus the US, negotiating, but they do, they almost all do, and that's how I know. The Office of the U.S. Trade Representative says the U.S. in 2016 had a goods and services trade surplus with Canada of $12.5 billion. And Trump's own 2018 economic report, which was released last month and signed by the president, also notes that the U.S. runs a net bilateral surplus only with Canada and the United Kingdom. But Trump and his top trade official, USTR Robert Lighthizer, argue that official statistics understate the size of the U.S. trade deficit with Canada, as well as with Mexico, because the data doesn't reflect the value of imports from China and other suppliers that first enter the U.S. and are then re-exported to one of the North American neighbors. "You have a number of $30, $40, $50 billion worth of transshipments that have nothing to do with the U.S. economy," Lighthizer told reporters in January of this year, at the end of a round of talks to renegotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement. "We end up having wrong numbers about Canada, wrong numbers about Mexico." The president's early morning tweet came after he bragged to donors at a closed-door fundraiser in Missouri on Wednesday evening that he recently told Trudeau the U.S. had a trade deficit with Canada, even though he wasn't sure of the details. He said the Canadian Prime Minister refuted his claim. "I didn't even know," Trump said, according to audio obtained by Politico. "I just said, you were wrong." Trump also reportedly asked staff to check on Trudeau's assertion that the U.S. does indeed have a trade surplus with Canada. He then said that the statistics don't include energy and timber, and when you do, we lose $17 billion a year, he said. It's incredible. The White House defended Trump's comments at a press briefing Thursday afternoon and appeared to embrace his formula, telling reporters that the data showing a surplus are not complete. The president was accurate because there is a trade deficit, and that was the point he was making, said White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders, adding, "There are plenty of things, once you take into the full account all of the trade between the two countries, that show that there actually is a deficit between those two." The latest back and forth over the deficit comes as the U.S. is negotiating with Canada and Mexico to modernize NAFTA, which took effect in 1994. Trump in recent weeks has repeatedly mentioned a U.S. trade deficit with Canada in the context of the NAFTA talks. "We have large trade deficits with Mexico and Canada," he has said, using that to defend his argument that the agreement has been a bad deal for Americans. But Canada's Foreign Affairs Ministry, which is leading the NAFTA talks for Ottawa, brushed off Trump's latest remarks. Canada and the United States have a balanced and mutually beneficial trading relationship. According to their own statistics, the U.S. runs a trade surplus with Canada, Adam Austin, a Foreign Affairs spokesperson, said Thursday. "We are energetically at work modernizing and updating NAFTA to support good jobs and the middle class in Canada, the United States, and Mexico." Trump's latest remarks are unlikely to have any significant effect on the ongoing talks, which are set to resume next month with another formal negotiating round, to be held outside Washington, D.C. "I think people just look at this and say, 'There he goes again,'" said Colin Robertson, a former Canadian diplomat who was part of the country's original NAFTA negotiating team. "I think people think Trudeau has managed Trump well to the national interest. They know that you can't insult him, because our prosperity depends on our ability to trade with the U.S. So don't get diverted," Robertson added. "Don't get fussed by this. Trump and Brady say more tax cuts coming. President Donald Trump and the House's top tax writer said separately Wednesday that Republicans are working on a second round of tax cuts. House Ways and Means Chairman Kevin Brady, Republican Texas, declined to discuss many details of what Republicans have in a minute, but said a proposal would be unveiled sometime this year. "We think even more can be done," he said in an interview with Fox Business Network. "We want to make sure we're encouraging innovation in America. We want to help families save for the long term." Later in the day, Trump said there would be a phase 2 for tax cuts, though he didn't provide any details either. "It's going to be something very special. Kevin Brady's working on it with me," Trump said at a roundtable discussion in St. Louis with business executives, workers and educators. Brady suggested the plan would call for extending the slate of tax cuts for individuals now due to expire at the end of 2025. "While the tax cuts for families were long-term, they're not yet permanent, so we're going to address issues like that," he said. The plan would be separate from any effort to fix glitches in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, H.R. 115, Brady added. "The idea may be to give Republicans more fodder for their campaigns, ahead of what's certain to be a difficult midterm election contest, rather than actually trying to enact more tax changes this year." Republicans appear poised to lose a special House election in a pro-Trump area of Pennsylvania, where they unexpectedly abandoned their tax cut message in the waning weeks of the race. A second tax cut proposal would also give Republicans a chance to revive a number of ideas they were forced to drop during consideration of their tax code rewrite, such as a long-sought cut in the capital gains tax rate. Any sincere effort to move another round of tax cuts through Congress this year would face long odds. It would surely draw objections over its cost, after the recent tax law added $1.5 trillion to the government's already huge deficits. And Senate Democrats could easily block legislation because Republicans plan to skip writing a budget this year. which means they won't be able to tap the fast-track reconciliation process used to enact the recent tax changes. When asked last week about the Republicans' upcoming tax agenda, House Speaker Paul Ryan said, "I don't think there's going to be any big changes coming through. Republicans do not have a timetable for producing the plan," Brady said, "beyond releasing it this year." He also ruled out some ideas, saying Republicans won't undo a $10,000 cap on a deduction for state and local taxes, nor abandon plans to kill, beginning next year, a long-standing break for alimony payments.